So let's go. Wesson oil does not soak through food. Now, this is an advertisement claim. This advertisement claim is true. However, Wesson oil, if heated to a certain temperature, will soak through food, as will all other types of food oils. And if all those oils are made cool enough, well, none of them will soak through food. This is a paraphrased outtake from a wonderful book called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. It's in the last chapter, and the purpose of this chapter is largely to focus on scientific integrity. In this instance I just gave, it is a true statement. Wesson oil doesn't soak through food, but it lacks scientific integrity, meaning that advertisement, which made it seem as though this oil was, it implied, simply in the way it stated this fact, that Wesson oil was the only oil, that had those properties. And when it comes to scientific integrity, you don't just say the positive. You're not just trying to persuade someone with the facts you provide. You're providing an array of facts. Any flaws in those facts, stipulations, doubts you have. And you don't hear that very much in advertisements, which I suppose makes a certain sort of sense because those advertisements are trying to persuade you to do something, trying to get you to do something. And yet I've seen that drift into our culture as a whole. I don't know about the entirety of it, but in parts of it, there's this acceptance of BS, acceptance of persuasion over objectivity. Politics comes into mind next. That it's been a very accepted part of politics to try to persuade people, as opposed to you lay out your platform, your pros, your cons. Maybe you lay out your understanding of the other people running, and then you just hand it to the citizens. Like, okay, I've given you this fair assessment of myself and others. Choose who you think is best. Not, I'm trying to pretty myself up to the nth degree, show you no ugliness. And then when I gotcha, I will, as the common theme goes, not fulfill many of my promises, and maybe even work in the inverse of what I said I was going to work towards. And it seems like a lot of people are getting fed up with that, but that's a bit of another topic. And so excuse my ramblings as I hone in on paradise. See if I can wrap these two thoughts together in a sense. Actually, you know what? Fuck it. I'll say this. I was planning to do a climate change segment today, and I've been working towards being much more having facts at hand, actually doing research more intensely into the subjects I would talk about on a solo round. Now, that being said, the climate change idea popped into my head a few days ago. I figured I could get some stats together and whip up something nice and quick. It turned out to be way more complicated and labor-intensive than I thought. I'm sure there are some people in the audience who are like, yeah, no fucking duh. It's one of those complicated sciences out there. And so I've put that on hold. That will be on a future episode. But I'm going to speak in the spirit of this cargo cult, which is the name of the chapter. I'm going to confuse the shit out of you for a second. The name of the chapter in which Feynman talks about persuasion versus objective relaying of facts, scientific integrity. I, in the spirit of science, in the spirit of pushing against consensus and trying to look from angles that are not popular, and maybe that I'm even told not to look at, that it's a waste of time, that is obviously already figured out. I've started to dig onto the side of climate science that says it is a problem, yes, but it's not cataclysmic, apocalyptic level problem. And when I cover that, I will cover both I'll tell you my flaws as well. But the reason I say that is that it struck me that climate science, had to adjust something. Climate science at the moment seems to be one of those things that is very politicized, very controversial. And what that means often is if you bring it up in conversation with the average person, and maybe even the people who study it, you get put into a tribe depending on what you think is going on. People have this idea in their head of what type of person believes or doesn't believe that climate change either exists or is a big problem. And if I were to even bring this up, I have this little hint that, from people who maybe lean towards Democrat, I'm dismissed. What is this nonsense you're bringing up? You're wasting our fucking time. This is an emergency, goddammit. This is an emergency. We need focus on it now. We need resources. This needs to be a top priority now. And if you waste our fucking time by bringing up these oppositions, we're going to have to waste time arguing with you instead of solving this problem, which we have little time to solve. That might be the Democratic response. Or maybe there would be a roll of the eyes and okay, fine, go ahead, tell me. While you have that air of, yeah, I already know and I'm what the truth is, and I'm just going to dismiss things you're saying. These are two caricatures I have in my head that will respond. Some people might actually open their ears, and I have had people open their ears with curiosity and respect in a conversation, which I've noticed be more enjoyable and productive, generally speaking. Truth. Controversy. I've heard controversy. I've heard you can learn much about a culture, if not the most about a culture, by looking at their controversies, their points of friction. And since climate change will not be the specific version of this I speak about today, I'll speak about being spoiled. Rich kids on the block who are entitled, given life too easy, and because of this, don't understand the work it takes to maintain a country, and don't understand what it takes to make something like that thrive. And for that, I will go to my notes really quick. Yes. There's a book called Brave New World. Now, before I go into that, I will say there's a common idea that the one of two dystopias, meaning horrible futures essentially, are possible and likely. There's what many of you may have heard of, the 1984-esque future where Big Brother is always watching you through the camera, through the phone, through the people you speak with, listening to what you're saying, monitoring it, controlling it very tightly, not letting anybody step out of line. And then there's the Brave New World dystopia. And in this book, Brave New World, the people of the upper classes. Life seems to be a nonstop collection of highs and orgies and feeling quote unquote good. They have medicines that I don't even know if that's a good word for it, but I'll say that for now. Drugs, medicines, opiate equivalents, where anytime you feel bad, all you gotta do is everyone has on hand this little mechanism, boom, and I feel blissed out. Blissed out. It's an interesting way to say it, blissed out. Like there's something you were in, the pain, and now you're outside of it, but it seems to carry a negative connotation, blissed out. As if there's something worthwhile to feeling bad from time to time. And so these people could go and whatever problem may have arisen, just go get nice and high, and you're good. And I've seen that theme in different forms of fiction, and it seems to be poking at this idea of entertaining ourselves to death, comforting ourselves to death. But there really is a part of me that wonders, like, what's so bad about having that on hand, having that high on hand that you can just click, and whenever you want, you get this wonderful, good feeling. But then you look at the tragedies of life. People dying. Everyone dies, as far as we know. Meaning you, every best friend you have, every family member, every loved one, every pet, child, etc. die. And if that happens and it hurts more than anything else that you felt before, should you just shoot up? Even if, and in this world, they didn't have clear negative side effects. And I mean strictly like chemically related side effects, because maybe there's a side effect in not suffering. Maybe there's a horrible side effect to not crying when your loved one passes away. It's very difficult to put into words. It's more of this feeling that I can't quite explain that tells me that, ooh, that seems off. That seems wrong. I've heard someone say that pain and pleasure are very closely knit, inextricably linked together. To go off on a tangent for a moment, talking about the tragedies of life. I worked in a gym. There's a lot of old folks came to this gym, and I trained quite a few of them. And something I noticed is that everyone loses a leg in life eventually. And what I mean by that is that I have this very clear, obvious, I don't want to say tragedy exactly, bad thing, this very bad thing. You know what? I'll call it a tragedy. This tragedy that you can see very clearly when you look at me. But when I spoke with those old folks, everyone had some equivalent to that. Whether they had a child who passed away, a wife who passed away, whether they messed up XYZ part of their body, you know, they've had a stroke, they're trying to gain their functions back at age 70, trying to talk again and learn to walk. And this wasn't a gym specifically for people who had medical problems, mind you. Some people with medical problems went there, but that's pretty much the same with every gym. No, this was just the average person I spoke to, because I'd like to get into these sort of deep conversations with people. I would find that everyone has these very hard times that they face. That's what I mean when I say that everyone loses a leg eventually. And perhaps there's something in the pain, in the feeling of the pain, instead of just oh, well, I fucked my leg up and this dream I have for my future, so let me just get really high and feel okay now. Feel okay now. And that actually is. That actually is what I did for quite a long time. Smoke a bunch of weed, video games, homies, laughing, joking, playing, smoking, feeling short-term good for quite a while, quite a few years. And I reached this point where this hollow feeling started to form in my gut, as if there was an emptiness to what I was doing, as if, well, to say quite plainly, it didn't feel good anymore. Well, you're smoking weed, you're playing video games, you're with your best friends, your family. How can you not feel good? Well, it didn't. In fact, it started to hurt quite a lot, and I started to look for purpose. Very interesting, purpose. Quick side note about purpose. I've heard that is one of the greatest sources of joy a human can have. Is not the reward from getting what you were trying to get. Let's say you want food or an orgasm or a high score, and you get it. But then as soon as you get it, boom, it's very quickly gone. But the joy of moving towards a reward, I see I'm making progress towards a reward. I've heard that is a very long-lasting, one of the best forms of joy a person can get. And so purpose. What is purpose? Something worthwhile. Something that I put my time into and I feel like I won't regret. But what if when I reach that junction, I had this button I could press where I would just feel amazing. That hollow feeling in my gut would just be gone, replaced by wonderful bliss. And to that, I say a couple things. One, will there still be a price to pay for it? Meaning, Lion King, Hakuna Matata. Something like live in the moment or being present, some shit like that. Oh, no, sorry, no. I'm going to get yelled at by someone for that. Hakuna Matata, no worries, pure bliss. The lion runs away, Simba, and he lives with these guys in this paradise. They go there, food, water, plentiful, safety, no real dangers that the movie showed. So you're safe, you have these good feelings, you're kind of just rolling around and playing, joy and delicious ripe fruit. But then, wah, 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 the hungry lion comes. But then the tyranny starts to touch you. But then perhaps even entropy starts to touch you. Entropy being the tendency and maybe even the immutable law in which order deteriorates into disorder if something is not actively keeping it in that state. And so there's this paradise that they have, but they didn't quite work for. They didn't quite earn. They haven't exactly been maintaining it. And the horrors and the tragedies of the world find them in the form of Nala, Simba's old friend, who's now starving, pushed to starvation and hunger and desperation, moving outside the bounds of their normal territory, looking for where can I find food? Where can I find... Oh, there's food. There's wonderful, delicious warthog food. But that warthog was Simba's friend, etc. If you've seen the movie, you know where it goes. They end up tussling, yada, yada, yada. Can you feel the love tonight? And Simba feels this almost guilt, this shame, which I must say is something I started to feel by playing video games and smoking weed and just hanging out. There was this kind of feeling of shame. That's not exact. I didn't feel attractive. I can definitely say that. And if I were to keep that up, which I technically could have for quite a while, that seems to be what leads you to the 30, 40-year-old man living in the parents' basement, still just playing video games and getting high and not really doing much else. Right? Like, I don't think that guy gets the beautiful woman in the story. You know what I mean? But what if? But what if I could just press that button and just live out all my dreams wonderfully, fantastically? I don't know. What would even be maintaining the society, that wonderful high? Well, what if I could have some automated system that was maintaining it around me, that was energized and self-repairing, and all that you have left to do is exist in endless rounds of orgy-esque bliss? Is it an immutable law of nature that says if you do that, the darkness will eventually find you? Is the yin and yang an absolute truth? Is there always going to be some darkness within that life? I don't know. Perhaps that was true for the entirety of human past, but who knows what's coming in the human future? Will we go through something that is a phase shift, that is the equivalent of maybe water turning from liquid to ice, where, oh my God, it's, if you never saw ice before and all you ever saw was liquid water, ice might be this unimaginable concept that plays by a very different set of rules. Not in every sense, but in many different senses. Is that what's happening with the human race, our species? What it means to live a good life? Well, at the moment, it seems no. At the moment, even if I could just go live in nothing but an opium den, I don't really want to. Which is very strange. Maybe there's a part of me that understands that that's not where the peaks of life lie. And then that brings me to the story of Siddhartha, Buddha. Siddhartha was his name before he became the Buddha, if I remember correctly. He is a boy born to a king. And this king is told, your son will either be the greatest king, the greatest ruler of a kingdom the world's ever known, or one of the greatest spiritual leaders the world has ever known. The king, being a practical man, a worldly man, wants his son to rule the kingdom. That is a responsible, reliable, he'll have food, shelter, etc. That is what he must do. And so I will create such a desirable palace and paradise for him, he will never want to leave. He will only ever stay here and flourish into the best king the world has ever known. So he creates this palace of beauty where his son only ever sees beautiful, healthy, young, virile people. He can have the most delicious foods, never moldy foods, never non-delicious foods. Probably get high too. And that was his life for years, for a long time. But, I forget the specifics. It might have just been good old curiosity of what lies outside the wall that pulled him outside the wall. But his father knew he wanted to leave and said, okay, I'll arrange a caravan to take you around the city so you can go see these lands. I think he was something to the effect of, if I'm going to rule these lands, I want to see the people. Maybe something like that. I forget the specifics. Continuing on. Sorry about that. So his father clears the city of any ugly old people, any sickness, any ugliness. The son goes out, but the gods had a different plan in mind. The gods transformed into an old man the first time he left, and he's going through his caravan. He sees this old man, and the first time he's ever seen an old person, and he asks the person driving the caravan, "What is that? What's going on with that guy?" The person says, "Well, Prince, that is old age. That comes to everyone. Every young person will eventually be old. It happens to rich people, poor people, all the same. And then death comes for them. And when they're old, a lot of their systems break down, etc. And so they shocked the prince. he kind of ran back into his paradise to, cope with this world-shattering understanding. And this happens several times, right? The curiosity builds back up. He goes back into the outside the wall. The gods show him a little bit more of the dark sides of life. And eventually he leaves the palace entirely and goes on to his journeys to eventually become the Buddha. But the reason I bring this up is there's this interesting idea of paradise, that if you give a human being that version of paradise, no negatives, just ripe fruit, beautiful people, the highs you could ever want, no sickness, that there's something in us that wants to leave eventually, that eventually we're going to want to go out. And it could take years, decades maybe, but something will call us. That's the idea of the story anyway. And that makes me wonder, I think I said some half-baked sentence earlier about people living in America, a bit of a spoiled paradise, or at least that there's an idea of that. And some truth to it. But me, within my own little version of paradise, I wanted to leave. Although that gets interesting because it stopped being paradise. It faded away and was replaced with something very different. Even though it was in the same place, as time moved through it, it became something ugly that I didn't want. But I've seen the theme in stories, in real lives, in which when a person gets to live in this area of pleasure and safety and comfort, they will naturally be called to leave, to go explore somewhere else. So maybe it's okay to roll around in the wonderful joys of paradise until you feel that urge. Maybe. Or maybe sometimes you got to whip your ass into gear because things are deteriorating so horribly that by the time you notice there's a problem going on, it will already be too late. But then you get into a context situation. But real quick, what I wanted to get into was there's a samurai, a ronin, masterless samurai, traveling through the lands of his country for years, and he comes across this land that he's absolutely in awe of. He doesn't hear murmurings among the farmers about how poorly the Lord is treating them. They kind of have a contented smile on their face while they're working. They smile to and wave to people when they pass by. The lands are lush with crops. The roads are well made. People are steady at work. Children at play. You come to learn later that the samurais who train in this area are some of the toughest motherfuckers around. That to become a member of this samurai clan, you have to work yourself to the fucking bone. And that's just the entrance exam. And so there's an interesting contrast in that idea between paradise, thriving society, and intense grind. There's also play going on. It's not just grind. But they found the balance of it. And so maybe this paradise that Simba found was inherently unstable because it wasn't being worked for. It lacked the hard grind part. It lacked the toughness. It lacked the lion with actual fucking teeth. Just had a lion eating bugs and fruits. But you know, a lion got some sharp motherfucking teeth and claws. And it seems like there's some utility in being good at violence. Or at least to have some people in your society who are very good at violence and who are also very well honed. And this brings me to Excuse me one moment. I've never seen war. I've only ever seen stories of it. And there's a part of me that absolutely hates and wishes it never had to be war. Torture, rape, people being accidentally killed, families and houses crumbling. Fuck that. And yet, I must pair that with the fact that I am extremely fascinated with war. I've paid money, and I am sure many of you have to go watch a movie about war, to read a book about war, to play a game about war. I've talked about it with people quite a lot. And something that I really, really need to contend with is my own personal desire to go to war. That there was and still is an extreme hunger for battle, which sounds so fucking corny, especially from someone who's never fucking seen jack shit. And yet, I crave it. Not very much anymore, although I sure love a good sparring round or paintballing session or aggressive video game. But when I was younger, like I'm not super young still, more than anything else, I wanted to go to war. And I didn't much give a shit who I was fighting for. I just wanted war. Whether I was a mercenary, ideally a special forces operative. Hell, I even thought about going to other countries to join their militaries at times, when I would hear badass stories. And yet I knew nothing about real war. And yet, the people who I've listened to who do know about war, who have seen it for years, lived in it, fought in it, that some of them, when they were around the age I was just describing myself as, they wanted the same thing, and they got it, and they loved it, and they fucking hated it. And so there really is something to the quote, "It was the best of times, and it was the worst of times." A book I talk about a lot, Tribe, by Sebastian Junger, gives accounts of people, civilians, living in wartime. And when it was done, they missed it. Not all of them, but quite a few. Interesting and perhaps alarming amount of people missed it. They missed the purpose. They missed the brotherhood. And to talk about the purpose for a second, the clarity of it, where you know how important what you're doing is. When you're transporting food or drinks or people, just as a civilian, not even as a soldier or an official medic. You're transporting these things. You understand life and limb is on the line. And for some reason, some people missed it. Some people thought it was the best fucking time in their life. And when the war was over, they were just, as they said, just a taxi cab driver. For humanity to thrive, we must find a moral equivalent to war. I forget who said that, but it is a goddamn beautiful quote that deeply resonates with me. If humanity was given nothing to do but enjoy nice warm baths filled with bubbling ecstasy, where they could simply fill their time with eating cake and busying themselves with procreation. That is a roughly paraphrased Dostoevsky quote. The first thing they would do after like a week was find something to smash, just to satisfy their chaotic nature. And so there seems a part of us, certainly of me, that craves chaos, the unknown, uncertainty, maybe even danger. And to not just recklessly gallivant through minefields. Ooh, blew up my other leg. Now I have something difficult to deal with. No. There's something like a carefully doing dangerous things, especially in a group. Climbing a mountain with my brothers. I long to go on a trip with them where we have nothing but backpacks of resources and maybe a portable tent and bed, and we have a week to just hike. And I don't want to trash my society too much on this, and maybe not even at all, because it seems like a lot of what I and many of the people I know are gifted with is this place where food, shelter, clothing are not the things that we worry about on the day-to-day. And so there is a piece of people who live in the developed world, well, at least in the middle class and upper classes, I must admit, in the spirit of scientific integrity, that I am lacking in knowledge when it comes to being broke. And so I don't want to speak for that section of society because there's a lot more I have to learn. But for the parts that I've lived in, there's very much that Buddha as a child element where we're given many of these wonderful toys to play with and a bit of paradise. And yet there's a strange tendency to experience what I've heard referred to as hedonic numbing, explained through the story of a man always dreamed to go to Italy. They go, oh, it's heaven. And for a week, they see nothing but heaven. The most delicious food scents in the air, the taste, oh, perfecto. The beauty of the architecture, the friendliness of the people. And after a week, traffic's running a little bit slow here. This chair's a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, it looks nice, but geez, couldn't you put a nice cushion in it? Hedonic numbing. A numbing to pleasure that can happen quite quickly. And so, I've heard in this book Musashi I always talk about that Musashi has this thing he notices when he's out of wartime. That life seems just as difficult in times without war and then times with war. It's just that the battle, so to speak, changes. Perhaps becomes more of an internal one where maybe you have to put some of those pressures on yourself. And now you're dealing with your false views of reality, the things you want in life that aren't actually worthwhile, but you don't quite realize or understand that yet. the struggles of your social relationships, of a job, a family, etc. And you know what? Perhaps this emphasis on war and battle is also a result of having a dominator culture. Now, I don't know how true this is, but it clicks in a strange way. There's a part of me that feels like there's truth in this statement. I've heard a man called Terence McKenna describe modern civilized society as a dominator culture. No pain, no gain. Embrace the grind. Work your fucking hardest or not at all. Maybe we're missing some of the gentle touch. Self-fulfilling prophecies. One of the strange parts of a human, I imagine. I wonder if like a wasp or a chimpanzee or gorilla, things that are, well, I don't know how close a wasp is, but things that are close to us in the evolutionary chain. I'm quite sure humans are the only ones who have created the concept of the future. It's weird to say because animals store up for, winters and food and things along those lines. They have some concept of the future. Long term, I don't know. I suppose I'd have to study it more to really get a solid grasp on the differences. But I'll say this. I've heard from a professor that humans discover the future in a sense. And if you combine that with our ability to tell stories, and by story, I'll give the example of where does a country exist, a nation? If you destroy a flag, does that destroy the country? If you destroy the literal land that it's on, do you destroy the country? What if you destroy all the people, but the land's still there? Well, I won't go through all the thought processes right in front of you. But to think through the mouth of another for a second. Okay, hold on. That's bothering the shit out of me. To think through the mouth of another, I'm in the process of what? Just regurgitating quotes, half-remembered quotes from other people, from other professors, and people I have deemed credible sources to you. What about independent thought? What about actually formulating these thoughts clearly for myself? Because as I'm saying that, I'm beginning to realize I don't know what the fuck this professor was really talking about when he described Yuval Noah Harari, the writer, the author of *Sapiens*. That's his big book on history of humankind, a short history of it. I think he's a history professor in the University of Israel, something like that. Anywho, smart guy. He's talked with a lot of very intelligent people and high powerful people, so he seems credible. And there's a tendency in me to take his thoughts just as gospel truth is the word that came to mind. Just because of him matching these resume check boxes. And yet I have found that it is possible for someone to move to a position of power and high status, let's say, while being incompetent, and that it requires some digging to find out the level of competency. And I haven't really dug very much into these statements outside of the book itself, which I imagine would be a biased sampling because it's coming from the person I'm trying to check the credibility of. But it also comes from the quotes of people who really liked his book on the front and back. Bill Gates, Obama, I think they have quotes, maybe like New York Times, deemed credible, truthful, honest. Which then would beg the question. Never mind. I'm not even going to go down that fucking path right now. No, fuck that. Go down that path. Yeah. Of Obama? Has he told lies? Maybe. Considering he's a politician, the thought passed through my head to say probably. But even that, I'm not so sure about. And then how to check that. How to check to make sure whether a politician is lying. Well, they have facts, PolitiFact, and things along those lines which check people for the validity of their statements. Then you would check how credible that website is, and you would go down this rabbit hole of credibility checking. And there does seem to be a point at which you reach bedrock credible, or at least bedrock of what you can go no deeper, go no further beyond this level of understanding and define credibility. Excuse me for the jumble that I just threw into your mind. The fast-paced, mild regurgitation of words from my mind. Credibility. How to know if a source is credible. Action. Test it. Test it. And as I say that, I am struck by the fact that I have not personally tested, pardon one moment, personally tested many of the claims that I taken as fact from the vast majority of perhaps facts I use. Well, I'm thinking about all the doctors I've went to, mechanics, books I've read, etc. How often have I gone to Bedrock and tested it myself? How often have I gone into my fucking car and checked what they said the problem was, then solved it myself? Or as a doctor, read up on all the studies that the research they've done and all the studies that they've observed and recorded, etc. And all the people and patients they've worked with. Like, at what point do you just trust? At what point is it reasonable and worthwhile, maybe worthwhile, fucking for sure, to trust? Reputation. Reputation seems important. What is the status other people have placed onto this person? What is the status of those people placing status? Is this person an asshole? Are they known to have lied before? To be really stingy, or to just be careless and not really focus, whatever the case may be. So reputation's a big one. And frankly, there's a time problem, because obviously to become an expert in everything, I rely on experts to inform me about and my decisions. I wonder if I would have any time to do anything but look into the information and credibility of an expert. Like, would that just be all I was doing, practically speaking? Every time I want to certify a recipe I'm looking up, or what the doctor tells me, mechanic, someone coming to do plumbing on your house, my prosthetist, so on and so forth, martial arts instructor, teacher. At what point is it impractical and you just not have enough time in one life to even fucking do that? I imagine you hit that wall pretty fucking quickly. And you know what? There is a lot that works when you just trust. No, okay, not just trust. When you have tested a few times the trust of this person, and just leave it be. Like, yeah, they're doing their fucking job. They're not messing up. What they say is going to happen happens the vast majority of the time. If I come to them with a problem, do what they say to fix it, or just let them fix it, it's generally not there the vast majority of the time. And so you are now deemed, credible. Why am I rambling about credibility and trust? Well, because that seems to be one of the staple major changes to our ways of life over the past few decades, and perhaps one of the biggest problems that I have noticed developed countries face today. Trying to agree on truth, on facts, and what sources of information are trustworthy, credible, and will provide facts. Difficult problem. Fascinating change in lifestyle. When it comes to things like political problems, climate science, global politics. Obviously, I may focus a lot more on politics that perhaps I should, or blah, blah. Scratch that. And I'm kind of left with this point of I don't fucking know. I don't fucking know exactly how to reliably and consistently test credibility in a way I don't regret. When I'm trying to figure out what long-term decisions to make for my life, to vote for in a community. To sift through the internet with clear eyes. Maybe looking a little more often than I normally would into topics I think are important, instead of just leaving it to the doctor or the priest or the politician. And the reason I say doctor and priest specifically, my dad said when he was growing up, those were essentially unquestionable sources of information. Priests and doctors, like, no, you just didn't question it. They were just fact, what they told you. And whether that's with what I already said a million times, so I won't repeat it. Many of the controversies nowadays. So look a little more often into it than I normally would. Add a few more doses of humility to my inquiries into these controversial topics, because perhaps there's a lot I don't know and a lot that I have gotten wrong. Respect when interacting with people, so they are more likely to tell you their weaknesses. And I don't mean to say that in a way like, so you can bite on their throat as soon as they show you their jugular. Like, no. What I mean by that is, so that when at least I have spoken to people with kindness, respect, humility, in my attempt to do that, I have noticed people be more willing to open up. And maybe I have misdiagnosed the reasons why they are more willing to open up, but that's what it seems to me at the moment. Kindness, respect, humility, honesty, not trying to fuck them over in the conversation we're having, and just curiosity, deep interest in the subject, that people will share with you their doubts about what's true, some more vulnerable worries they have, some flaws they have, or some flaws they think, some flaws the people and arguments they agree with have. And that's a beautiful thing, because then it seems you get closer to arriving at a place of objectivity, a place of seeing clearly. And then, what the fuck's the difference between objectivity and subjectivity? Okay, objectivity, when I think about objectivity, the image comes into my mind of multiple analysts observing some phenomenon, right? You want to figure out what would be an experiment. You want to figure out whether or not drunk driving impairs your ability to drive. So you put these people on a course, okay, go on the course with a few shots in you, and we'll compare these two different groups of people who we've randomly selected. The drunk people keep crashing, so, okay, drunkenness, bad on the courses. Maybe provide several different types of courses just to make sure it wasn't that course specifically that worked poorly with alcohol, weird shit like that. You get a bunch of scientists to watch this measurement, like, oh, okay, yeah, it clearly makes it more dangerous. I recognize this is a ridiculous experiment, but I couldn't think of any on the moment, in the moment, so we're just fucking going with it. And so, yeah, you do that. And what they all agree on being true, all those scientists observing it, creating different restrictions and measurements and ways to find out, test your hypothesis, If you drink out this amount of alcohol, then you're more likely to get into accidents, You're testing that. And when all these people agree on being true, that's true. You've removed the subject, right? The individual truth being the only truth. Meaning, if you only ask the person who's drinking, you ask one person, well, one person might think they drink better on alcohol. They drive better when they're drunk. They're like, nah, bro, trust me. When I drive drunk, I am so fucking confident. I feel so wonderful with the way I'm driving. It's fucking, trust me. I'm not more likely to get into an accident. You're worrying about nothing. That might be the subjective view of it. But then you test them a few times, and you're like, oh, no, you are definitely more dangerous when you're drinking. And yet, what does it mean to miss the soul of something? To have something be detached from objectivity. To have something be... Sorry for that abrupt cutoff. We are going to... not continue that line of thought between objective and subjective. Changing topics. If someone is in hell and you tell them hell is being destroyed, they won't care. Many people are in hell today. So when they hear the environment is being destroyed, they don't care. First, take them out of hell and into heaven, a heaven on earth, so that they can care about their environment. That is a paraphrased quote from a man called Aubrey Marcus. And I'm not sure what amount of truth lies in that statement, but feels like some truth does. And so to build on that truth for a moment, I will get into the power of a story, a belief, let's say. There's a man who said he doesn't believe in anything. There are things he knows and doesn't know. To believe, he said something along the lines of, to believe is to have, there's a great doubt in whether or not this is true, but you are going to treat it like it is true. And in doing so, block off potentials to see reality, because you have shifted your lens such that you have put an illusion into your reality. Now, I am both paraphrasing and extending off on my own thoughts with these people's quotes. So take that for what it's worth, and I hope you would ever message in the comments a question and enjoy the conversation. So, believe. It's an interesting idea to not believe in anything. Because once you do, I'm reminded of this study. 2 groups given milkshake. One group told the milkshake is the healthiest drink on the market. And you prototype in the works, it's going to blow everything else out of the water. That is in essence what they were told. Other group told it's your stereotypical, super bad for you, but super delicious milkshake. And they test these people's certain physiological markers within them. The specifics I forget. But to give you an example, it would sound something like this group has higher cholesterol than the other, or more of X vitamin or Y vitamin. And it seems like the reason is because they believe different stories about this smoothie. And so I'm not sure if believing in nothing is the proper thing to do in response to this, but it does inform me that story is very important. And perhaps there's a story to be believed in when you are trying not to believe in things, because you hold the story that remaining agnostic is the best thing to do. Not sure where I would go with that thought, but it is interesting to note the power of story. And also that the stories that fill someone's head, what affects that? I wonder how much literally watching a movie, reading a book, etc., absorbing stories affects the way you view literal reality, the stereotypes you might build of a certain type of person, or the ideas about what you should do in certain situations, because I've certainly used stories, both real and fictional, whatever real means, in life. I've applied them to life, and some have worked and some probably haven't. I can only remember the ones that have at the moment, interestingly enough. To be careful what stories we take in, what diet we feed our mind. I think I should sink my teeth more deeply into these topics I'm talking about, dig deeper into the surface. The War of Art, a book that largely talks about being a professional, arriving to work daily and getting work done daily. And that if you do that, a gem will arise from that. And it's talking about it specifically in the realm of art. For example, an author, get X amount of words done a day, or X amount of time spent typing a day. And when you do that, when you sink your teeth into something, when you go more than a few inches below the surface, the author suggests that that is where the greatest gems of life are to be found, or at least the greatest gems of art. And that in today's society, many people stay but a few inches above, or a few inches below the water. Quote hits my head that most fish spend their lives near the surface of the ocean, dancing with the waves to and fro. But few know the depths of the ocean. To combine that with a common theme in mythical stories, according to Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell, and Jordan Peterson, that the Joker, the trickster, is the precursor to the hero. An example might be when you're starting to get good at something, it might do to still be the playful Joker, the fool, the playful fool. Because remember, the fool and the jester and the Joker and the trickster are all a very tightly knit, close together character, part of ourselves. And yet it strikes me that you can remain purely the fool, the playful fool, who gets good at a jack of all trades, let's say, but becomes a master of none. Which, I've heard the end of that quote is, jack of all trades is a master of none, but better than a master of one. And then, of course, I'm hit by the quote that if you pair together all the quotes and words of wisdom you've ever heard, they cancel each other out. So, I will simply say that to sink my teeth into something at a rate that I find acceptable, I'm finding myself with a stronger and stronger desire to continue practicing the disciplines I'm putting more time into, whether with my staff, not a stick, singing, studying. I used to have this new year, new me mentality where the fucking January starts up and I go in full fucking throttle and I just go full power. But I blow my load early, blow my gasket. And then, fuck it. I don't want to keep doing that. But I've learned some wisdom that, as I've tested, seems to be quite true. To when you start a new habit, too many people stop doing said thing because they go too hard in the beginning. They make it so unpleasant that for whatever reason, this then leads to them wanting to stop doing the activity. And so I've been more playful with things. And as a result, I'm spending more and more hours doing them. And interestingly enough, I am more willing to dive deeper into the discomfort. Although every now and then I still go back to just playing if it feels too much. But I'm getting more and more willing to go deeper into discomfort. I'm doing it more consistently. And there's a dictum in Islam, from what I've heard from people who follow Islam, that consistency is more important than intensity. And maybe in America in general, there's a tendency to lean towards intensity. Boom. Super fucking explosive. Oh, shit. And the Green Maverick. Push it to the limit, motherfucker. And there's a beauty to that. But that being said, to roll back a little bit. Consistent with occasional bursts, perhaps. Not as if it's a marathon. Because life does not seem to be just a marathon or a sprint. It seems to be a combination of uphill, downhill, flat land, marathon, and sprint. This obstacle course, this long, hopefully long-term obstacle course that you must be willing to make many adjustments to. What do you want to be a master in, if anything?